everyone, and welcome to the virtual edition of our year-round screening series, Film Independent Presents. My name is Rachel Bleemer, Director of Events for Film Independent. Before we get started with today's exciting discussion, I have to give some praise to our sponsors. Thank you to our incredible lead sponsor, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, our screening partner, Vision Media, and our media partner, the Los Angeles Times. I'm honored to introduce our guest moderator today. Please welcome Entertainment Weekly's movies editor, David Canfield. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got quite a film to talk about here, and we're joined by star Sienna Miller, director Tara Miele, and Shivani Rawat, the producer on the film. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
So it's a pretty emotional experience I feel like we all just went through. It's a beautiful film, Tara, and a really heartbreaking one at times. And given that we have sort of three of the core creative forces behind this film here, I wanted to start before we really get into the content of the film with the genesis, how you all came together, and where this idea came from, and how it evolved.
So I mean, I can start with my husband and I did survive a pretty bad car crash about 7 years ago. And in the aftermath of that, I did have that moment that Adrienne has on the couch where she's calling to the baby, and the baby is ignoring her because she's a baby. But in my head at the time, it felt so clear to me that I was dead, that the crash had happened, I had not survived, and that I was just sort of witnessing what came after. And thankfully that passed. I mean, it was just a blip, but felt so true as a blip. And then months later or weeks later, we were at my parents' house for Thanksgiving, and everybody was fighting over the turkey and the kids are crying. And I just was really overwhelmed with gratitude for the fact that we were still there and living these messy, delicate little lives. So there was something sort of about the fragility of our lives, about the sense of my own mortality being a parent. And then also I lost a few people in my life in that time. And there was an interesting parallel between a state of concussion where I couldn't sort of trust my own perception of things. And then also the psychosis of grief that we go through, and how our brains protect us. So I was interested in those two things. And then, you know, in terms of getting these lovely ladies on board, I think Sienna had slipped the script, thank goodness, and had responded to it. And we had a conversation, and I was so thrilled that she was interested in this role. I think Sienna is such an incredible talent, and she's just fiercely intelligent. And she really understood it in a deeply emotional way, and a really, I felt was ready to go to the depths that this role sort of required. It's like a lot of gymnastics. I just think, you know, she's like a character soul, and she dove right into it and really vanished right into it. Never said no. It was such hard work, and she just tirelessly stuck with it. And I'm just ever grateful for her. And then we went so Lynette Howell Taylor was a producer on the project as well with Sam Houseman, and they had previously worked with Shivani Rawat and Monica Levinson at Shiv Hunts Pictures. And we took our package of, you know, the script and me and the lookbook and Sienna and Diego to them. And thank goodness that, I mean, they were just the perfect partners for this. They really had a vision for it and a trust in me. We had spoken with some other financiers who had some other versions of how the movie could be executed. But they're really intuitive and filmmaker forward financier, and very supportive producers. And so that was sort of how all the magic came together.
So being here I love that we're here for Film Independent, because it is a movie made such in that spirit, it feels like. Shivani, can you talk a little bit about exactly what Tara was saying? Having that filmmaker forward perspective and working with her and with Sienna to execute this vision.
Sure, yeah. I remember beginning of 2018, Lynette called me up, Lynette Howell, and she said, I have a beautiful script for you to read. And I read the script, and when I called Lynette back, I said, I really want to do this project. And, you know, I knew Tara was a first-time director, sorry. And I just was intrigued by it. And then Lynette's like, it's based on her personal story. And that took me by a bit of a surprise, because I was like, I could tell, like, we read so many scripts every day, but there's that one script that touches you, and it sort of, you know, you want to read it again and again. And that was the case with me in Wonder Darkly. Like, I was just like, I called back Lynette and I said, I really want to do this project. Let's get going. And then Sienna was, said yes to the project. So it felt like a really big dream team. But I just feel like, for me, again, it's independent filmmaking, but for me, it's all about supporting female empowerment and female filmmakers. And I loved when I found out that Tara had written the script, was directing it. So it was like a double sort of a score. And I just feel I'm so happy that we had actually Tara directing her own story and her own project. And I give Tara full credit of bringing it, whatever she went through personally and all of us during production, but bringing it to the screens. And I'm so happy, Tara, we got to do this project with you, and Sienna being the person that we could tell our stories through. So I'm grateful that I got to be part of the project. Yeah.
Sienna, I love this image of you being slipped the script because it's such a specific, unique kind of script. What was your first reaction to it, and what drew you to it?
I read it. I remember I was on my roof in New York and had sort of been sifting through a pile and read it and was in pieces. And my mother was staying with me, and she came up and she read it and also sobbed. And it was just one of those moments where you read something and the emotional reaction was so visceral. It was so true. Something about it, which I didn't realize at the time. Of course, I've dissected it since, but something about it really resonated and touched me. And every time I read that script, I felt really emotional. And so I actually phoned up and asked to do it, which was very un-English and a first for me. Hi, I want to play that part. I'm much more coy normally and just annoying. But it was spectacular. It was just unlike anything I'd read, and surreal and sort of poignant and internal and confusing and then shocking. It was beautiful.
I'm curious about that shift from encountering it on the page to filming it, because structurally, it's very specific, and you can feel the sort of personal element of it as well in the filmmaking. How did you find that transition? Was there anything about Adrian that maybe was newly revealed to you once the cameras were rolling?
I think from the moment where I read it and saw it as it was so literary, it was such a kind of dreamscape to read. Then I realized I actually had to go do it, which was the moment where I got really scared, because what you can kind of internalize on a page is really different to performing it. And especially the moments where you're in the present and then you're in the past within the same scene multiple times, you're kind of hopping back between time genres and trying to make that seamless and trying to feel good about it. I found that really difficult. Diego did too. Tara was very reassuring and just trust us, this is working. And there's no way that kind of clunkiness feels seamless when your whole modus operandi in life is to sort of make something natural, because it's such an unnatural way of being. But Tara had such a vision, and it was so clear what she was doing. We just had to trust her. But it was hard, and it was demanding emotionally, obviously, as well.
Yeah. Tara, for you, I'm curious about the practicalities of making this movie. As Sienna mentioned, all of these time jumps, all of these sort of dips between memory and reality and fantasy. You leave a lot of little details, and we'll talk about the payoff at the end. But how did you go into it with a specific kind of strategy, or how did you have this in your head in terms of getting on set and getting what you needed in what I imagine was a fairly short amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, we had a pretty short shoot schedule, I think 24 days and a couple of pickups. And we moved a lot. We were at LACMA and on rooftops and in the ocean and then doing car crashes. It was quite an ambitious schedule. Here's the truth. I think as a writer, you make problems, and as a director, you solve problems. Something for me in this one in particular, having been so close to the material, it was almost hard to anticipate. There were so many unique things about the script. It was hard to anticipate what people wouldn't understand. So it was a real process of so many conversations through prep, so much collaboration between the departments. I went through and created a timeline of events, just like in real order, to make sure we didn't have some paradox that I hadn't noticed when I was in this, dreamscape of writing. And thank God it all worked out. And then, sorry, I see my kids are outside going crazy. And then, once we got on set and we got it on its feet, even after the rehearsal process, which felt like a positive and an easy sort of flow, on set got really difficult at times, we all wanted to hold ourselves to a standard of an elevated piece of work. Everyone had a visceral reaction. I think Sienna and Diego came to the project with like personal vulnerabilities, and everybody felt quite exposed, in doing the work. And in some ways, that's the only way it could have happened, to be on that precipice of, oh God, I hope this works. Otherwise, what are you doing? It's like we were kind of sort of like facing the unknown. And I think that's where creative things happen. So there were times that I think a lot of the job was just like Sienna sort of said, like reassuring them that it was wonderful and it was working. And it was a little bit hard because I think they were struggling so much. And at the monitor for me or behind camera, it was so good. It was always so good. So there was a little bit of a dissonance of having to execute it and feeling like it was strange and watching it and seeing how gorgeous it was. That was these two different experiences that we were having. And I just had to keep telling them, like, you guys are fantastic. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. So, yeah.
Shivani, what was that part like from your perspective, the facilitating this shoot?
I think, every shoot you go through the ups and downs, but I would say this is a special one because for the first time I got to work with a lot of female powers, I should say. We had a writer director who was a female. Our department heads were all female, and we just all 4 producers are female. So I just felt like, for me personally, things got done easily. And I was really super satisfied when I would see things. I'm like, wow, it's supposed to take 5 days, but things were getting done in 3 days. And that for me was, I was like, this is the first time I'm experiencing in my, in a production that things are going smoothly. And of course you have the ups and downs, but I just have, and I think I'll give full credit to Tara again, being the captain of our ship and just sailing it so smoothly. And everything from department, be it Carolina's work or like even Katie Byron, who's a production designer, like things were just crisp and I loved it. So, it's a memorable one for me, especially. Yeah.
Let's get into one of the things I love most about this movie, which is the dynamic between Adrian and Mateo, and particularly just this sort of very naturalistic, at times very playful, at times much raw dynamic between you. Sienna, what was it like finding that with Diego, and how did you bring yourself to that in addition to what was on the page? What did you find in the interplay?
I mean, it was scripted really clearly, and I think that the levity was important given the kind of intensity of some other moments, and Tara had planned that meticulously in the script. We rehearsed, and Diego and I had been friends before, so there was a shorthand, there was a kind of familiarity that I think really helped. But we tried to get really specific in terms of the language that a couple shares in a relationship, the little things that they do that are specific to them. So where we put our heads on each other, that's something that we decided before was like one of our things. And like Tara said, the rehearsal process got really personal. So we went into this kind of unarmed, if you know what I mean. And I think both come from a theatre background where you can jump in and play. It felt in moments like doing a play with the breaking of the fourth wall is how it felt in those moments. But all of that personal stuff, it just kind of develops if you're present in something and if the script calls for it and the environment calls for it and our director is guiding us there. You just hope you get along, and thank God we did. And we held on to each other through it because it was difficult and sad and, and complicated. So I think that shows probably.
Tara, how did you want it to feel? How did you envision it, the dynamic between this couple?
Yeah, I think Sienna said it really well, that it needed to be so grounded and so connected and obviously believable, right? So I think what we tried to do was to give a lot of support to that. It was like around them, as soon as Mateo shows up back in Adrian's world, the camera gets verite, handheld. It's very grounded. It's very real. Carolina was not allowed to use a lot of lights because we were going on this crazy surreal journey and wanted to give them as much support for the reality of their world as possible. Production design spent an incredible amount of time making sure that the books on their bookshelves were the sorts of books that they would have. It's like art books and you know, the textiles are from the right region of Mexico where Mateo would have been from. I mean, and we had conversations with them. We were like, what color do you guys want your kitchen? You know, we were very much about the specificity of this interethnic couple living in this place, in this time, in this situation. And I really feel like that was the key to making it work, you know, and by the way, and just handing the characters over to Sienna and Diego and saying they're yours, and letting them elevate them off the page in a way that I could never have written them. So that was, they're all theirs. That was just for me to get out of the way.
What did they show you about these two characters that maybe weren't on the page for you?
You know, it's just the spark of like life and the nuance. There were a lot of times where they would sort of say to me in a scene, like, you know, we don't need this bit. We'll show it to you. Like, we don't need to say these lines. We'll show you that. And I think as a writer, you're like, no, say every word I've ever written. And then you're like, oh yeah, I trust you. You know, I trust you. And there was some of that negotiation throughout, was like, you know, what did I think we had to hold on for just for the rationale of the play, right? Of like the symphony of what had to play out. What were we going to miss if I didn't get it? And then what could we do both ways so that just in case I was wrong, and they were wonderfully right so many times. So I have like some versions of both. Yeah, you know, it's an interesting thing. You just put so much trust in the performers to take it on. And they did it beautifully, truly.
Sienna, was there a scene or part of the shoot that was particularly difficult for you to figure out, or complicated, something that you really had to work through?
I think the hardest, kind of most memorable moment would be the moment where I discover the truth about what's actually happened.
Yeah.
And find the box of his possessions and have to kind of, it was, if I remember right, I feel like we were on one shot in and then out. It was like it was just incredibly intense, and like the rock of that grief that you have to get to, because it's just the only option. Like there's no, like, I'm going to play it this way, or what about this version? Like there is one version of that experience, and that is that your insides fall out and you crumble. And I was really nervous about it in anticipation of doing it, and then kind of trying to get into that space, and we're up against the clock. You know, it's independent film, like, you know, it's complicated. But that moment, it took me a while after that scene to kind of regroup and pull myself back together, and there's other stuff to go and do. But that was the singular moment that I remember feeling like, woof, like, I don't know that I have much more that I can show in terms of grief exploration in cinema than I did in that scene. And yeah. I think I've also explored grief now from that one moment. But the whole thing was heavy, but we also, like, I don't know, there's something so life affirming about this story. You know, it's grief, but it's so human. It feels so authentic. It feels like, I don't know, I feel like love for it. It doesn't feel like just knock after knock, even though it's dealing with something that's poignant and hard.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny you mention that scene, because that was really the one I was thinking of, that sort of intensity that this movie carries. Did you find the role hard to shake off when you finished filming?
Yeah, I to a certain degree, I felt the weight of it. I think that it deals with such a huge scope of human experience. Like every existential crisis you possibly could ever have is like grouped into her experience. She's completely lost, disillusioned, confused, grieving, imagining the unimaginable, which is that I've left my child and my child will be raised by someone. So it's impossible as a mother to not go there, you know, and have these and put yourself in that experience. And you just kind of have to buckle up and surrender to something like that, which, like, I've signed up for this, I'm doing it, but it's unpleasant. But weirdly, I'm enjoying it. There's catharsis. Who am I? What am I? Like, you go off on some spiral. And then afterwards, there's like relief because it's done, and it's like in the hands of someone that you trust. And but it's the heaviness, the weight stays with you. And you've asked those questions. You've philosophically gone there. You know, that stays with you. But with that comes, you know, another layer of something that you use somewhere else. I don't know.
Shivani, I'm curious for you, being at the project before shooting versus seeing the finished film, was there something that jumped out to you mainly because it is a movie that I think comes alive in the way that it's put together.
I think I remember when, visiting set when we were going during production, you get to see bit by bit, and you're seeing the dailies every day, and giving Tara our feedback, and that sort of works out. But I remember when we did our first test screening with Tara, and just a few weeks back, during the screening, just a few weeks earlier, I had lost our family dog. So I was, just upset, and I remember seeing the film, and during just that one scene, which it just, something came in me and I started sobbing, and I've never sobbed at any of our test screenings, especially when you have to give your notes to the director. And I look to my left and Monica's crying, then I look to my right and Lynette's crying, and everyone, I'm like, okay, we all feel this, and somewhere each one of us just connected in a different way. And I was just like, all I could think of was like my pet dog, my family's dog, and I just kept crying. And I remember giving Tara a big hug and saying, this is perfect, like this is even more perfect than what I read. And I think kudos to Sienna and Diego. They're, acting and just getting the characters alive. It just, you feel for Adrian's character, you feel for Mateo. And then, I just feel like whoever I've described the story to, everyone is like, all my family, friends, whoever it is, they're like, we can't wait to watch it, because everyone at some point has lost someone. And I feel, and it's just a message that, people go, they leave you. It's just the memories that live. And I just feel like this story has such a strong message of that. And just in general, it's I can't wait for the audience to see it when it releases, because it's going to be connecting each lives in a just in a personal journey. So I felt that for it. So yeah.
Well, for those who have seen it just now, let's get into the ending a little bit. It's that moment. It's so brilliant, I think, in the way it brings everything together. But Tara, I'm curious, how did it first come to you in that way? Especially knowing, you kind of are leaving viewers on the hook until that point, so to speak.
How did the ending come to me? Is that
yeah, and how did you, especially in the context of the whole film and how it brought it together for you in the way that I think it does for a lot of people watching it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. My very first sort of kernel of this came at like 3 a.m. It was like I was like hot with the idea, and I was like, oh, that's it. That's basically like a 3-sentence version of it, and I knew the beginning, the middle, and the end. And that's sort of like my first piece of my process. So I knew the ending was inherent to the impetus of the project. And then as I was developing it, I tried to put that bit aside in some ways, because if you're writing at that, then it becomes like a strange thing so then he's a ghost, or he's in her head, and then he's only like a version of who she thinks he is in her head. And actually Diego and I had a lot of those conversations, and I was always bent to tell him, no, you're just a person, like just be a person, just be you, because I think it's too meta to get into I'm the version of her, version of me or something. But it was definitely always that was always the trajectory. When I was writing it, my husband, who is like my biggest cheerleader, he is fine, he's alive, he's lovely. I was like, I'm killing you. He was like, okay, do good work. But it's like your worst nightmare. I feel like I just heard this quote from Arthur Miller talking about how writing is like half confession and like half exploration of who you are in the world and your place in the world and the way the world works. And that meant so much to me. I was like, oh God, that's what I've done in this film. It's like trying to figure it all out, what matters to me. And at the end of the day, I think we're all in this moment of quarantine now where we're having this sort of collective state of grief and loss and reevaluating what matters to us, who we love and how we love. So yeah, I mean, I guess I left everybody on the hook for that ending. And I certainly worked very hard technically to make sure that didn't know. I mean, in the script and then the production and even in the edit, I mean, it was constantly like a thing. Let's make sure, when do people know? And does it matter? If people figure it out early, I thought it was really interesting at Sundance. Some like Latinx audience members were like, oh, I knew the second he saw the hooded figure at Day of the Dead because he saw death. And I was like, what a cultural signifier that audience picked up on that and that other people didn't. So I hope the movie works whether you know or not. I think the emotional journey is still there, whether people are genius and figure it out and are onto us or not. But yeah, it was just, you know, I mean, look, I think that's with anything with a film, you're trying to take the audience's hand and take them along a journey and not give away what's coming next. You know, it's like my least favorite thing when I read a script and I'm ahead of it. I'm like, oh, I think I know what's coming, you know? So it's nice to feel surprised. That's how life treats you, right? You have no idea what's coming. So.
Yeah. It's funny. I have to say, my partner is a Cuban American, and we were watching it, and he actually did sort of figure it out, and I was like, "What?" in that exact moment. So that's pretty funny. Yeah. So that theory bears out. My last question for each of you is, you know, this is a movie so rich with meaning, and it's very interpretive in a lot of ways. And I'm curious for each of you, you know, at this stage, and Tara, I love what you said about experiencing the movie now. You know, how does it sit with you in terms of what it means to you and what it says about, you know, life? Not to get too big or anything. Sienna, I'll start with you.
You know, I think it's a perfect movie for this year. I think everybody can relate to feeling completely discombobulated. Sorry, that's my dog. Going over. Walter feels it too, he's saying. Yeah, I think that at the end of this movie, you have the impulse to reach out to people that you love or have hurt or have misunderstood and kind of smooth things over and make things better and feel the gratitude that Tara's talked about for the lives that we have. We have been in this collective state of grief. It's been a very, very confusing time, and anything that makes us feel connected to a human experience, whether it's through grief or love or loss or nostalgia, is poignant and perfect for now.
That's awesome. Tara, what about you?
Yeah, you know, I really think not only because of COVID, but probably because of our political landscape right now, it's so hard to see each other as humans. And I think there is this real interesting thing about grief that I do think we all grieve in the same way deep down. I mean, it is like this deep truth, right? That like death is an inevitability for all of us. It's almost like I want to laugh saying it, right? Like that is a truth, right? That we are all going to face for the people we love and for ourselves. And we totally ignore it all the time. And I think probably to our detriment, and not to say that we should live every day like, you know, this precious, like sort of pious, whatever appreciation of it. But certainly finding joy in what you have around you and appreciation for the things that truly matter, for who we love and how we love, I think is a wonderful thing to examine, and whatever that means to people individually, whether it's like Shivani said with her dog. I remember that day when she said, my dog just died. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's so interesting. I mean, I've had people tell me about their children who have died, or a relationship they almost lost, or a father who's passed. It's just very fascinating to me how people who you would think you have nothing in common with are connected in this way, right? That we are all connected in this way. I think it's a really powerful thing to be able to recognize our shared humanity.
Very true. And Shivani, I'll give you the last word.
I agree with both of them. They collectively gave my thoughts, but I just want to say, you know, the biggest calamity that's hit all of us is COVID. And I feel like it's during this time, if you haven't realized what love is and who you love and who you would go give your life for, you know, then I don't think we've learned anything. And I think this movie teaches you that. And just, I feel it's about the fact that you're losing a loved one. But at the same time, I remember when we were at Sundance, there was a lady after our screening, and she said, the first thing I did was I called up my husband, you know. And then there was another person, I remember we were just walking and she's like, I love that movie because I'm divorced, but I just kind of thought about all the, you know, situations. If I, you know, it was something emotional that hit her in a personal way. So I just feel like, you know, both Sienna and Tara said that it's just, if, you know, it's about just spreading love, but at the same time, really nourishing and cherishing the loved ones you have. So, you know, I guess that's the gist of it. Yeah.
I think a good message for everybody. The film is Wander Darkly. Thank you to all of you for this rich conversation and also for this really beautiful film. We really appreciate it. I'm David Canfield with Entertainment Weekly. Thank you.